I guess I can start my session. It's time. So let's see, share my screen. Okay, you should be seeing my slides. Awesome. Let me stop my video. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining my session at DrupalCon Europe 2021. I hope you enjoyed the whole event so far and you have your coffee with you. So let's start and talk about the business value of design. I am actually alone today. Unfortunately, my co-presenter got sick. She doesn't have a voice, so I'm going to be the only person talking about the business value of design. It's an unfortunate situation because I am a Drupal business developer at the company. Cynthia is responsible for UX business development, but I hope we will survive together. What's important or useful to know about our team is that we are a Hungarian company. We have a UX UI department, a Drupal team, and we also do app development, and we also have DevOps services. So let's dive in. Why we decided to talk about this topic. In the past few years, both of us have been participating in projects, web projects and product development as well, where UX and information architecture were equally important, and it basically brought together what the clients needed. In every case, it turned out that good UX and design are must-haves for the big picture. This is the phase where the concept is shaping, where the small bits and pieces come together to basically allow the magic to happen. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what UX is, how it brings together the business goals with the user needs, and how the whole process is coming together during the technology implementation. We will also talk about two projects where the main differences were made by the presence or the lack of the UX processes. Okay, so let's go into it. But let's start first what user experience or UX is. So UX is how a person feels when they are interacting with a system. This system can be a website, an application, or some kind of software, basically any kind of human interaction with some kind of device. UX is important because it aims to fulfill what the users need. The goal is to create a positive experience for them, to keep them on the platform as long as possible, to generate some kind of conversion. Good UX cannot really live without understanding the user journeys or the personas, and basically what moves the business forward to generate more money. While the user experience can be different for everyone else, it's a must to get close to potential users, to talk to them and see how they use the product. To ask questions and to listen to their answers is equally important, and this is what's happening basically during the steps of the UX process, understanding everything. It's very beneficial for both the development team and the client as well to understand more about the business, to have a better overall process, and of course, realistic expectations. So what does the UX process look like? The answer to this question is, of course, always it depends. The process we use will depend on the type of the product we're designing. Different projects require different approaches. And of course, this approach to a corporate website differs from the way we design a dating app, for example. Most designers are familiar with the concept of design thinking as a UX process. This has, in general, the UX process has 5 stages in it: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Most design processes originate from this concept. For the sake of simplicity, today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 key phases of design thinking approach when it comes to product or web design. As you saw in the previous slides with the diagram, there are 3 main parts of good UX: business goals, user needs, and technology. And first, we're going to talk about the projects and the business needs they came with, because originally the idea is to show you some examples. There we have 2 examples for you where the clients had very different approaches to the UX processes. Through their needs and requirements, I'm going to show how the actual end result was being shaped and reshaped in the end. And there's a disclaimer before I start talking about the projects. You may be familiar with this from South Park. We didn't want to put anyone into the situation of explicitly talking about their decisions and challenges during these projects. So I am going to be using example projects, but the situations described are going to be real. I'm sure some of them will be familiar for you. In the end, development companies usually have the same challenges. Okay, so our first project that I would like to talk to you about is an online movie portal. It's not Netflix, though, which generates an income through monthly subscription and per video renting. The site, when they approached, had 14,000 users signed up, but only 2,000 of them have spent at least a penny in the past 6 months. And the marketing team knew that if they wanted to grow this number, they needed to do something on their website. Technically, they had a pretty good website. There were some few small technical issues, and the biggest problem was that they didn't really have enough users to spend money. The main communication was happening with the marketing team. They thought they understood quite much about their customers, although they didn't really understand what the problem was and why they didn't spend more money. Since their main needs were to generate more conversion and income, they wanted to have a new modern 21st century design and additional features that may result in generating more money. They also needed some new features for the movie pages. Their idea was to have some configurable landing pages for movie genres that they were able to put together and fill it with content in the hope of convincing visitors that certain movies are worth to spend money on. So this is basically where we started with them. The other example project is a furniture shop and portal, where the front of the store was a showroom where regular customers could look around, see what they liked, and then they had the opportunity to go to the shop in person to try the products and buy there. The backend was basically a portal for interior designers where they could put together shopping lists for their projects, and they could buy in bulk if they wanted to. The goal of the furniture shop client was to make a better user experience for the users, because since they launched the webshop portal, it grew in functionalities, but that did not really follow the UX needs. The client came with the notion in mind that even though they talk to their customers regularly, they do not really have the knowledge to understand everything about them, but they were really open and humble with their approach. So they really wanted to give the task to professionals to figure out what to do. Before we started researching what our clients needed, we wanted to understand what they had at the time. And this meant that we needed to do site audits. So let's talk about site audits. In our company, and I know many other companies do this as well, we do site audits for both UX and the technical framework. UX audit is useful if we have to redesign a website. Technical audit is mostly suggested when we are asked to take over and further improve an already existing site. In both cases, this means a few days long process through which our colleagues audit the website or web application. The aim of the audit is to validate the current state of the application in the context of short and long-term business, UX, technical goals such as visual appearance, performance, maintainability, security. Regardless of the specifics, meaning that we are looking through the site from UX perspective or from technical point of view, we go through the same steps, and the outcome of each step is basically the similar, or let's say the end result. We first start with the exploratory research, where we learn more about the website or product. What are the challenges and business goals? Here we try to understand and pinpoint potential issues and errors there are on the site, And we try to understand what these could cause to the product or the site. This is the time when we collect materials, metrics, and user data, and we go into analyzing them. And this is the time when we also start discussions with the marketing people or the team that is using it actively. The next step is the deep analysis. And during this, it's basically about looking into analytics and doing market research. In technical audits, the engineers look through the code base, and this process includes reviewing the code performance along with the security details, the configuration, and the development and maintenance workflows. In case of UX, we look into the website and measure the layout with the business goals. The problems and the opportunities are prioritized based on their importance and the needs. The third step is basically a list of recommendations of what could be done to improve. The deliverable in this case is a report, which has all the findings in detail and action items to solutions and recommendations to address all the problems we found. And as a last step, we design an action plan where we discuss next steps and the roadmap together with the client to allow or help the product to reach its full potential, basically. And we did project audits in case of our projects as well. This is something that the client can usually decide if they want to spend money on, so it's not a necessity. In this case, we also had different approaches. In case of the movie portal, their budget was kind of limited, and they only asked for a technical audit. They said in the beginning that they knew their visitors and what they needed, and since they really didn't want to go into spending money or more money, they were not really easy to convince. And even like they understood the risks, but they said this would be a good approach for them, just a technical audit. The idea was that after this audit, we will understand what the obstacles are, and we will build a list of objectives from there. As a result of their technical audit, we were able to confirm that the general state of the site was pretty good. The code was good, the solutions utilized on the site were generally okay, and the site served as a good base to build more improvements upon. The performance of the site was something that had to be improved, but that looked like a pretty easy challenge. In case of the furniture shop, they wanted to start with a UX audit because after a few discussions, they realized that it may be better to understand and clarify the current challenges, and hopefully it will result in a new website instead of hacking the legacy website. The most important result of this audit, UX audit, was that there were flaws in all of the user flows. For simple visitors, it was not really clear how they can actually buy the items. They were all looking for a possibility to buy through the website. The interior designers who were using the back portal, basically, they could not really use the site because it was hard to find different variations of the products. And the backend users who were supposed to manage the products or the numbers or the locations where these products were available, they could not really get through the interface easily. And overall, in both projects, it turned out that with improvements, the site could be saved, but more work was needed. So now we knew that the client, what the client had, and we kind of knew what they wanted. But before we move on to the next phase in our projects, I would like to share some thoughts with you about what are the most important phases of UX design. One of the most important steps in UX design is actually done before the product team creates anything. This is the product definitions phase. Before you can build a product, you need to understand the context for the existence of the whole product. This phase sets the foundation for the final product, basically. This is the time when UX designers brainstorm around the design and the product itself at the highest level. So the concept is shaping, and this is happening with the stakeholders. In this phase, there are a few different steps. For example, stakeholder interviews, when we interview key decision makers to gather insight about business goals. This is the time for the value proposition mapping, when we think about key aspects and value propositions of the product, what it is, like what the actual product is, who will use it, why they will use it. This is the next step in this is concept sketching. When we're creating an early mock-up of the future product, this can be a low fidelity paper sketches of the product's architecture. It doesn't need to be very detailed, awesome design. And this phase typically ends up with a project kickoff meeting. These meetings bring all the key players together to set proper expectations for both the product team and the stakeholders as well. It covers the high-level outline of the product purpose, the team structure, like who will design and develop, what their roles will be, what are the communication channels, meaning how they will work together, and what are the expectations of the stakeholders, like KPIs, and how to measure the success in the end. The UX research phase is our next step. It typically includes both user research and market research. Product designers think of research as a good investment. Good research informs design decisions, and investing in research early in the process can save a lot of time and money down the road, as we will demonstrate. The product research phase is probably the most variable between projects. It depends on the complexity of the product, timing, available resources, and many other factors come into play. This phase can include individual in-depth interviews or IDI, because the whole, a good product experience starts with a good understanding of the users. These interviews give some qualitative data about the target audience, like what are their needs, wants, what their fear of, what are their motivations, and basically their behavior too. Competitive research helps UX designers understand industry standards and identify opportunities for the product within its particular niche. And then comes the analysis part. The aim of this phase is to draw insights from data collected during the research phase, moving from what users want, think, or need to why they actually want, think, or need it. This phase of the process basically includes creating user personas, which are fictional characters or to represent the different user types for the website or the product. There are also user stories here, which is practically a tool that helps designers to understand what are the interactions in the product or the service from the user's point of view. Storyboarding is also coming into play, which is a tool that helps the designers to connect user personas and user stories. As the name suggests, it's essentially a story about a user interacting with the product. When users' wants, needs, and expectations from a product or service are clear, the designers move to the design phase. At this step, the teams work on various activities from creating information architecture or IA to the actual UI design. The design phase usually includes creating wireframes, which is a tool that helps designers visualize the basic structure of a future page, like the key elements, what are the key elements and how they fit together. It also acts as the backbone of the product, and the designers often use them as a foundation for mockups and prototypes. Prototypes are an integral part of the design process. While wireframes are mostly about structure and visual hierarchy, which is the look, prototypes are about actual interaction, experience, the look and the feel together. It's basically a simulation of the product and can be low fidelity or high fidelity, like coded prototypes. Basically, it's what is helping the customers or the client to in giving and hearing feedback. And it also is a good way to test the flow of the design. The next part here is the design specification. Design specifications contain the visual design assets that are required for developers to turn the prototypes into a working product. And also in this phase, we do create design systems for larger projects, for example, where designers typically create a system of components and patterns and styles that help both the designer and development team to stay on the same page regarding the design. And the last step here is the validation or testing phase, when because it helps the teams to understand whether their design works for their users or not. Usually, the validation phase starts after the high fidelity design when it's ready. Since testing with this kind of design, it provides more valuable feedback, for example, from the end users. During the series of user testing sessions, the team validates the product or service with both the decision makers and the end users as well. There could be, here are some examples that could be included in this phase, like the testing on your own concept, where the earlier the team can try out the product, the better it will be, because they are able to give feedback early on. There are some testing sessions with people who represent the target audience, and this is very important as well. There are many different formats you can try. There are moderated and unmoderated usability testing, focus groups, beta testing, or A/B testing. In our examples, I will share a bit later how we did the A/B testing in our projects. Surveys are also great to capture quantitative and qualitative information. There can even be open-ended questions like, what part of the website do you dislike? And then this way they can get specific opinions, like specific feature feedback. And the last here is basically analytics, like quantitative data, of course, through clicks and navigation time and search queries. These can happen through analytics tools. This will also tell a lot about how users interact with the product. Before I go into details about the UX research on our projects, I wanted to share a bit about how nobody should really underestimate the power of good UX. Today, user experience has become a mainstream term used to describe how we interface with the products on the websites in our lives, but there are still many who don't really understand yet what the relation is to business. For both physical and digital spaces, good UX is usually invisible, as it works like the person thinks it should work to help them complete their task. This means it's typically overlooked. So good UX is not just a good-looking website. It's also very holistic because it involves research, business, and technology working seamlessly together. Bad UX user experience, on the other hand, is visible and quantifiable. For example, where poor user experience can lead. It can lead to low conversion rates with decreased sales, increased operational costs because there are so many support requests that it's hard to handle. It can also have a negative impact on the brand, and last but not least, unhappy customers and poor ratings and reviews, and everything here is something that we don't want to happen. It is also important to mention that business systems that are used by the employees, where the primarily focus isn't on sales, but on the efficiency and productivity and effectiveness, good UX can help employees to be more productive and effective. When you have a poorly designed internal business system, it can lead to higher staff fluctuation or decreased productivity. There could be more trainings and support costs, which is an operational thing. And of course, decreased job satisfaction. So as you can see, it's not just the user experience, but the employee experience too. UX is the foundation upon which everything else is built on. So if you're creating something, it can be like physical space or in digital product, you always want to consider the user experience. If you try to cut corners and jump straight into design and execution, it will be much more difficult and expensive to fix things down the road. So now we know how it should be done in theory. Let's see how the user research went in our project. After we did the audit, we started to prepare for the UX research phase, but unfortunately, in the case of the movie portal, our client arrived pretty much prepared, for the kickoff meeting, and they had materials and information about their users. As it turned out, these information were not factual ones, only informations based on assumptions. We didn't really had any choice. We had to work with what we got. It's a risky business when it comes to UX research and research results because it's easy to misdesign or misunderstand what the users really want and what the frustrations they have. The key findings about this portal highlighted several problems with the registration and the onboarding process. The client's main request was to redesign and rethink the whole registration process. It made us to implement more compulsory fields upon registration. As a result, the users had to choose and select their preferred movie and series genres prior to their first login, so the system could instantly provide personalized content for them. However, we had the furniture shop where we had a totally different experience because they knew how important UX research was from the beginning. So we started to prepare for in-depth interviews for the client, where the company provided 3 customers and 3 employees to discuss the details. We also prepared quantitative and qualitative survey for the interviewees. And each interview took like 1.5 hours to complete. Then we went into processing the materials and recordings and put everything together. As a result, we have uncovered several problems and opportunities, but the most important recognition was the long and ineffective communication flow between the designers and the customers. In a nutshell, since this was like mostly used by interior designers, they had to choose many items from different rooms, and it was difficult to make the final decision with their own clients which item to choose. So we wanted to obviously help that. So based on the UX research, we designed and developed a brand new feature specifically for designers who can use this separate admin interface for assembling items more effectively. This feature made it possible for the interior designers, to assign selected items to specific rooms and then add items to lists they created. As a result, they could easily share their own lists with clients who could make their decisions in a smoother and more comfortable way. As you can see, this is a small but important feature, and this could have never been developed without proper UX research. Okay, so now we have finished our UX research phase. We have a new term coming here, information architecture. A well-designed information architecture ensures that users spend less time and effort searching for information, and they are successful in finding what they need. The understanding that builds the basis of the information architecture are what is the information the visitors need, like what they are planning to do on the site or what they are supposed to be doing, what's the most important thing that they need to do in the shortest time. The next one is the content of the site or the application. The job here is to identify what are the common features in the content, what groups are there for similar types of information, how these small pieces are linked together. Like, for example, in case of a Drupal site, it's like, I don't know, nodes and entities and stuff like that. And last, budgetary limitations and the business goals come into the picture as well. This is mainly what the client has as possibility at hand, but it brings a lot of limitations sometimes into the project in general. Ideally, a UX designer needs to have some kind of information architecture skills, but this is an entirely different job. In the absence of a website's content, design is just a decorative art, which is not enough. The information architect and the UX designer have to work collaboratively during this phase, applying the principles of information architecture to ensure that the users actually benefit from the use of the result, whatever it may be. In the core, they are the people who create the information architecture that is based on the websites or apps content, and this is what's laying down the foundation of the technological approach to basically what they design, it's going to be implemented. So this is, of course, a very important step. The main job here is to define the strategy that works well with the client goals and expectations, conduct user research even more to collect information about what the users want and need and could use. And then it's also about analyzing the data and deciding about the best approaches. So now we have all the information available. We have a good architecture. We have wireframes as well. We have a specification we can work with. We are ready to start the development. I don't really want to go into much details about this because the idea here is, of course, to implement what was in the specifications. It doesn't really matter what kind of programming language you work with, or if you work in waterfall or you do agile and stuff like that. The idea is that this is the phase where the previously designed and defined magic happens. I don't really want to go into the development part of the project because most of us here probably knows how this goes. But let's see what challenges we had with all the things that happened before. The movie portal started from a bit harder situation where we had a specification, but it wasn't really thought through. And even though in writing it made sense, it was pretty clear pretty soon that we had to make assumptions and ask questions. And if you have a waterfall project, it's not really possible to keep the deadlines well. And if you are facing this situation, if you have to go back and forth. This raised the frustration level of the development team as well with the marketing team. They started clicking through the site rather soon and understood how the processes were. But despite our suggestions, they were not really open to many changes. In case of the furniture shop, after getting through the challenges we had with the UX processes, it was possible to have a pretty good specification and a well-designed architecture, which allowed the project to be planned and executed mostly in time. The client participation was also very active, and there was a constant back and forth communication during the development phase and of course after handing over. In web projects, there are a few proven methods for testing. Some of them happen through the development process. Some of them only make sense after the final touches. Of course, during development, we have manual testing and QA, and we also do automated tests. But here I would like to talk to you about the other method that we use to verify what we were doing was actually good. And it's A/B testing, and it's pretty good stuff. A/B testing is also known as split or bucket testing, and it's basically about comparing two versions of almost the same thing to see which one performs the better with the users. And it's very good method and very much recommended for example, marketing people to test landing pages, call to actions, colors or copies, and many other things. There is always a control part where something is as usually. For example, a page on a production environment that has been used for a while. The experiment part is the new version that is sent out only to see how the visitors engage, if they engage more with it, if they don't really like it that much. There are many plugins and modules within all kinds of CMSs to make it easier, so you don't really have to do much. Basically redirects the users to different landing pages, and I really do recommend using these to try out and see if the budget allows. It takes some time though. In some cases it's like 2 weeks, can be more, but it's very, very useful. In our projects, in the end, we conducted these A/B testings, but the initial approach was not the same for both clients. For the movie portal, initially they didn't really want to do it, but we could convince them to try because we didn't have UX audit or a very specific design. And at least it made sense to leave something for the actual visitors to decide. A/B testing was on for 2 weeks. and it was for the registration process and the newly created landing pages. As a result, we had two important conclusions. First, it turned out that during the registration process, the users didn't really like to select their preferred genres because they wanted to browse through the movies themselves. And then the idea of the marketing people to create landing pages for their genres or movies led to a conclusion that people want to choose what they are interested in. They prefer to have only movie recommendations, and it helped their browsing experience a lot. So they didn't want anyone to tell them what to look at. And all this led to another round of research and implementation of features that never existed before. In case of the furniture shop, since they wanted A/B testing right away, it made sense because we could test out a few ideas. It proved to be a successful validation of the designer feature. Internal workflows and customer experience were enhanced dramatically, basically, and more referrals were made. The way browsing was working among product categories was still not really clear for the users, so we had to make further developments. But in both cases, we can say that A/B testing made a big difference in understanding the products, and it gave us some ideas about how we could make it better. So let's see the numbers. In case of our movie portal, the original estimation gave us a specification. We had a finalized scope, and we knew that we had to create wireframes, all like we had some sort of design, and all this needs to be implemented. After the launch, it was clear that the newly implemented landing pages do not really perform. So we shared our thoughts with the clients and suggested to simply create some kind of recommendation system within the page for the movie genres, like I said. This resulted in a better workflow, but the cost was still significant, 30% overhead. They kind of were happy, but this could have been started better. In case of the furniture shop, we consider this process as the trinity of development, meaning that in our original estimation, we included UX research, UX and UI design, and development too. And this was all approved and needed by the client. As a result, we only had to do some minor configuration changes, but the site was doing good and it performed well with the customers. And the client's happiness level was above the clouds. With regards to the statistics and metrics about the projects, we experienced huge differences after delivering. As you can see, both companies generated about 55% increase in purchases, resulting in a better conversion rate and higher net revenues within a pretty short period of time. As for the overall happiness and stress level of the projects, in case of the furniture shop, we had a pretty good, smooth, and great client experience. In case of the movie portal, it was a rather bumpy road with us due to lack of UX research and proper design. But fortunately, in the end, we managed to create a great product for our clients. The feelings in the end, in general, the clients were happy in both cases because they had a new thing. But the way it went with the furniture shop left a better impression with the client. And in case of the movie portal, they were not entirely satisfied due to the overhead, which is, to be honest, understandable. Yeah, so what is the conclusion? The numbers sound really sweet, but what is the actual benefit of a good UX process? Let me summarize. For the development team, it's clear that in the end, the developers need to have some kind of understanding of the outcome of what they are building. Without this understanding, it's not really possible, or it is possible, but it's not really advised to even start. And in my experience, developers also like to understand what they are building and what is coming together under their hands. A well-understood architecture leads to a good structure as well in the website, where the elements help each other and they do not work against each other and other elements. The development time can be significantly decreased if in advance the goal is clear and it's well planned and organized, because it's easier to put the puzzle together. This obviously leads to a smaller overhead during the development phase. Ideally, fewer errors and unconnected dots come up, and the resources will not be wasted. good UX also has a big part in client retention. And in the end, we are building something that is generating the client's everyday income, so they will be kind of happy. Developing a poor UX will leave a lasting impression, and they will not want to return to us. For the clients, first of all, they get a chance to better understand the people they earn their money from, who they are and what they do on the website. Then they also get to understand what their problems are and what they really, really want from the site they are going to be interacting with. A good UX on a website leads to significantly increased customer satisfaction in already the shorter term, but definitely it happens in the long run. If a user finds easily what they're looking for, the need for customer assistance or support will also decrease. And last but not least, the return on investment will be higher than ever. If a product is good, it will be used and the money they invested will come back. So we can say that it means overall happiness to everyone. I hope that you learned something new from this session. This was basically my talk, and I'm happy to answer if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Okay, I can see there are some questions in the Q&A. So, how much time do you spend on the research, especially user interviews? I feel this could become extensive and easy to spend too much time with this. So, what we usually do is basically we plan this in advance, so we know how much time we want to do, and this is what we sell to our clients. We usually do at least two or three interviews with each of the user groups. And that's like 1.5 hour long interviews. We pretty much prepare for it, so we know exactly what we want to drive it to. And then it takes a bit shorter time to analyze the data. But overall, this is how much time we spend on it. It can, of course, be longer, and it also depends on how many user groups we are facing. But yeah, I hope this answers the question. Okay, how do you get from wireframe to prototype? In other words, what do you do to decide on color palettes, typography, shape, and layout? When we go from wireframe to prototype, that's basically when the design phase is starting. So at that time, we understand the client's needs, and if they have a brand guide or like brand book or visual guidelines or something like that, we use on that. But if they really want something new or something that's a complete redesign, then we first we do the wireframes, of course, after when we have clarified the visual specifics. How do you offer and sell from sales point of view? Do you estimate for each project separately or have general packages? Or it's a good question, and thank you very much for that. So what we do is we have two approaches. We sell smaller packages as well, where we have audits, for example, or we include some more steps. We have pretty fine estimates that we can put into packages regarding how much this would be if we want only this part or that part, etc. But in general, for example, in case we know, I don't know, we have 2 or 3 user groups and we know we want to do UX research as well and everything by the book, we know that it would take around 150, 180 hours. That's a pretty average number. We can do it in shorter amount of time, but that means that the data that we're going to analyze, first of all, gather, it's not going to be that much. So it's easier to go into the details and figure out how it could actually work with the final product. Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I hope I could answer them. If you have any more questions, you can find me on in email. It's zsofia.major@cheppers.com. And you can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can also find me here in the messages on the top right corner. So please reach out to me. I am very happy to talk about this topic, even though I'm personally not in UX. I think it's a pretty good topic and important. Thank you very much, and have a good day, and have a good DrupalCon. It's the last day, so enjoy. Bye.